quarterback. Mike Evans, Mr. Consistent.
Yeah, I like Mike Evans. I had him at number 11. Uh, Listen, he's been pretty consistent every year. I like him and Mayfield's connection. I think they have chemistry. Evans had 13 touchdowns and over 1,200 yards last year on 79 receptions. I think Evans is probably going to have a similar type year this year. I don't know if he'll have 13 touchdowns because I think if Godwin stays healthy, which is something that he's kind of struggled with, that Godwin is going to, maybe take some of that away. I don't think he's going to take a lot away and stuff. I think Evans is going to be borderline wide receiver 10 in the rankings. He's definitely a number one receiver, in the, on a team. And I love him and Baker Mayfield's chemistry, especially given that Baker came in when he did. So,
yeah, Mike Evans has been consistent no matter who's been at quarterback, from Winston to
every year he's been over
Brady to
1,000
Field. Yeah,
yards.
and he's even done it on years where he's played 13 games. Like, that's just nuts. Like, this dude is just honestly a goat in my eyes at a receiver. Just consistently over 1,000 yards, 10 straight seasons of it ever since his rookie year. Like, you can't knock this guy at all.
He's a Hall of Fame receiver.
Oh,
he's got a ring, and so he's definitely going to be a Hall of Fame receiver. And I just think that his production might go down a little bit, but I think he's right on the borderline. I could see him, maybe somewhere up around what he was last year, number 7. But I also could see him maybe falling to 12.
Yeah.
But I definitely think he'll be in the top 12.
Yeah, and he's targeted over 100 times every year, and a lot of those years it's 120 plus. So this is a guy I definitely would draft. You have to start him every week unless he's hurt. And even when he's hurt, don't stress about him. Every time he's been hurt, like, yeah, you're going to have one bad week, just put him in next week that he's healthy and you're fine. Like, this guy's a beast. And
he had one year where he was targeted 173 times.
As quarterback, Jameis Winston. He doesn't even need a top notch quarterback. He'll get the dang ball in his hands. I like this guy. He's consistent, and yeah, he's definitely a future Hall of Famer. So, enough said there. Davante Adams.
Again, what can you say about Davante Adams? He's put up, great numbers over the last several years. I mean, last year his numbers were down a little bit, but I think that had a lot to do with their quarterback play, not so much Davante Adams himself. He was targeted 175 times last year.
Only 5 less than the year
before. And he usually is always right around that 10 touchdown, anywhere from 10. Last year he only had 8, but usually he's around 10 to 15 touchdowns a year. This guy is 31 and he's still going. Again, just like Mike Evans, he's Mr. Consistency. Again, he's another Hall of Fame quarterback or wide receiver for sure. I think he's going to be, right around the same numbers this year and definitely going to be top 10.
Yeah, and Davante Adams is Davante Adams. I think where his production kind of fell off was due to the quarterback play, but I think a lot of really the big plays, like 40-plus yards downfield, ended up going to Jacoby Myers last year. I think it was just a nice addition from the Raiders to get Myers, and it kind of took some of that, down the field work away from Adams a little bit, but Adams still capitalized with 103 receptions and 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get 175 targets this year. They brought in, they drafted Brock Bowers and, at tight end, and they still got, Myers at tight end as well. Both of those guys are top tier tight ends. And Bowers, I heard, might be even lining up in some wide receiver sets for them. So I don't think Davante's going to get the same amount of targets. But I think his quarterback situation is a little bit better than it was last year for sure. So I definitely think that he still is going to be right around that 100. I think he's still going to be around that 100 reception, um, mark this year, even with those other guys there because he's Davante Adams.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, his production and targets will go down, but I still think he'll probably have like 120, 130 targets next year.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. He's definitely one of those guys.
Puka Nacua.
Yeah, I think we got Puka right where he needs to be. Um, Boy, for a rookie last year, he just exploded. As everybody knows, he had almost 1,500 yards and 6 touchdowns, 105 receptions. He played 17 games, so he was healthy all last year. Listen, you know, that that's great. I think, you know, I think he's definitely an exception to the rule on some of these rookie wide receivers. And I don't know. I think he'll. I don't know that he's gonna if he'll have around 1,400 yards again this year. Um, I will say this: if Cooper Kupp struggles injury wise, I can see him having around 1,400 yards. If Cooper Kupp is healthy all year, I think that Puka's production is probably going to go down a little bit. I don't think he's going to have that many yards. Um, but with that being said, I think he's still going to be, he could be close to that. But I also could see him, taper off to somewhere in the 1,300 range. I could still see him having around 90 to 100 receptions, just like he did last year. Uh, Listen, everybody knows about the sophomore jinx. I want to see how it plays out. I still think he's a number one receiver in fantasy. You don't just come off a 1,400-yard season and fall off the face of the earth, right? I think the only thing that would hold him back is if for some reason he had some kind of injury come up and he couldn't play multiple games. But I definitely think he's right where he needs to be on our ranking.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's right where we need him to be, but I also think that his touchdown production will go up this year. But I do agree with you. I think we see him taper off a little bit around like that 1,300 range yard wise. But I do see him with like another 2 or 3 touchdowns to his name this year. I just think having Cup on the field kind of helps him get more open. And for some reason, people still want to focus on Cup rather than this guy. This guy is just a freak of nature and really went unnoticed going into the year. I know in our league he wasn't even drafted, so definitely a wide receiver one, in my opinion at least.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be perfectly fine this year. I don't think he'll fall off at all. Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, I love Garrett Wilson. I think he's gonna have a great year this year. I definitely think that he played his first 2 years. Uh, he was over 1,000 yards each of those years, and that was with horrendous quarterbacks. You know, uh, and well, last year I think they brought in Flacco, right? Wasn't it Flacco?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't
No,
Flacco.
they had terrible quarterbacks. Flacco was to the Browns.
Oh, Flacco was with the Browns. Okay. Well, at any rate, he didn't have a lot of touchdowns, but listen, he's got Aaron Rodgers, and if there's any guy that is gonna, make his production go up, I think it's Aaron Rodgers. I know Aaron's getting old, but Aaron and Davante had that connection. I know that there's been talk about they're not on the same page at training camp. I think that that's all past now. I've been watching some videos from their training camp today, and him and Aaron were just lighting it up. I think that this guy is definitely gonna he has the potential to make it up into the top five if both him and Aaron stay healthy, which I don't see. For him, I think he's proven that he's been able to do it, and so I think he'll do it. I definitely think that he's going to be right around that 100 reception, if not a little bit more this year. I can see him around, I think he could be around 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards, maybe even a little bit higher, depending on how it works out with him. Especially if Mike Williams stays healthy this year, I think that plus they got Lazard and stuff. I do think that Wilson's going to have a great year, and I expect great things from him this year.
Yeah, I think he's gonna have a really great year, and I think his connection with Rodgers throughout the year is going to kind of mimic his connection with Davante Adams. Um, Now we're not gonna have too many years of that with how old Rodgers is getting, unless he pulls a Tom Brady and plays another 5 or 6 years. But this year going to be really good for Garrett Wilson. You definitely got to draft him, and he's an easy wide receiver one start every week. Yeah, that's enough said. He'll have 100 receptions, like you said, and I don't disagree with anything there. AJ Brown.
Yeah, AJ was really hard for me to to predict. Last year he finished in the top five. Uh, it, this was a hard one for me because I think he definitely could be in the top five. He's AJ Brown. He had over 1,400 yards, over 100 receptions last year. He's another guy that's been pretty consistent since he's been in the league. 7 touchdowns. He doesn't. The last couple of years he hasn't missed. At least last year and the year before he played it. Every game. So I definitely think he's going to be right around the same range this year as he was last year, and he definitely could make it into the top five. It was just hard. It was a hard decision for me, rating the top 10, and because any of these guys could be interchangeable and stuff. But I do think he's going to have a similar year as he did last year. So that's all I can say about him.
I mean, he's a beast, and I think we'll see about the same production. I mean, the last 2 years have been pretty consistent yard wise. I think he's one of those receivers that any point in any given year he can go for 10 plus touchdowns. So I could see him being upwards of top three, but I could also maybe see him being that top, 8 or 9, like maybe Davante and Mike Evans pop off this year. Like really, like you said, any one of those guys right here in the top 10 can be interchangeable, and that's just how football goes.
Yeah.